Dave Mann. Dave, kia ora, welcome to the program today.
Hey, kia ora, Andrew.
Writing a book in your spare time. I'm not sure where you get the time, actually. Now, the writing process is finished, but still a bit of a journey between that part of the process and publication and being able to hold a copy in your hand, I imagine.
Yeah. The draft title is Aotearoa, New Zealand's Untold Story,
hmm
and just look at the significance of Christianity to the shaping of our cultural values. But yeah, we've got probably three months of people editing, 3 or 4 months of design, and we might do a launch about mid next year once Hope Project's behind us.
Now, people often contrast the secular with the religious, but a claim that you make is that, secularism is in itself a religion. Now, that's a bold claim straight off the bat.
Yeah, I mean, the idea of secular is to say that there's no religious affiliation that's necessary. And so if we go back to where the ideas came from, it's actually ancient Israel.
hmm
And so the king is established, he has a secular authority, a jurisdiction under God's values, and the prophet and the priest are entirely separate. The king isn't over them to call him to account. So this is the separation of church and state,
Yep.
which theologians throughout the ages have spoken about. And this is where the idea in our culture of a secular government that doesn't require a statement of faith. You know, every politician doesn't have to sign the Apostles' Creed before they're allowed to be a politician.
Yep.
This is where the idea came from, but our secular government sat inside a Christian cultural context.
hmm
And what we've done as a culture is that we have tried to remove the word Christian from Christian secular to just have secular, but there's always a value system. There's always a religious view, which means we've just replaced it really with atheism. And so we're now religiously an atheistic secular nation instead of a Christian secular.
Okay.
Secularism is a worldview if we take the adjective Christian out from before it.
Okay, and that well explained in that regard, and the idea of church and state. I mean, that's big in the United States. Ironically, though, the idea of faith and politics seems to be more evident than ever in the states at the moment. But this idea that secularism is somehow neutral. That rather than taking a particular faith point of view, that it's a neutral point of view. It doesn't take a faith perspective. Therefore, it's fair to people of all faiths and none. You wouldn't subscribe to that. In fact, I understand that you see the current trajectory of secularism to be dangerous for our society. Why so?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. There is no neutral. There is no morally neutral. Either every human is of value because they're created in the image of God, or they're not. And if they're not, you're into Darwin's sort of evolution, and
Yep.
people are accidents of chance. It's the survival of the fittest as the primary ethical foundation, in which case power counts rather than love. And that idea of power counting is where socialism, which leads to communism and fascism as political ideas and all of their sort of variations, these all come from that, which is how government has worked through the eons of time, except for Judaism and Christianity pointing back to bring a separation of powers with a Christian or Jewish value and a free state. So yeah, it's a dangerous trajectory because if you reject the value of the individual, well, you can just kill the babies that you don't want.
Yep.
And eventually you'll kill the born babies, not just the unborn that you don't want. And you'll kill people with disabilities because why should they suffer? There'll always be a legitimizing. And then you'll have a class structure, and then you'll believe that power is allowed to be used to look after the people, and they will become equal in their poverty rather than their prosperity, because corruption is returning, because there's no longer the inner conscience of a belief in a Christian God who will call us to moral account as a politician. And so as we begin to line all those things up, we realize that values are everything. A secular state without a Christian idea behind it is going to take us down the same path as the French Revolution and a myriad of cultural revolutions that have followed, always ending in disaster in our history.
We certainly have seen some of the consequences of that in the last few generations here in New Zealand, and we could list plenty of examples, which I suppose brings us to the point that it is perhaps even more surprising that there seems to be a tidal change on this one. Rather than the slippery slope towards oblivion, there seems to be a tipping of the scales in the opposite direction, a stronger interest in Christian faith, even from what has become essentially a secular atheistic society. That is somewhat remarkable.
Yeah, I would say we're still very much in New Zealand, a Christian secular nation, and we
Okay.
still hold to so many Christian values in the public square. We just don't call them by that name, and most of the public are ignorant of our history and how we came to believe as we do. But yeah, I mean, I think nothing more than the undermining of the family
Mm.
has resulted in untold disaster, and I think our wider culture is awakening to the idea that the promises of secularism have failed us. And so, where once we talked about being a post Christian society, I think we're heading very much to being a post secular society, which is to say, post a society that rejects any regard for Christianity within its public life. I mean, to note some names, J.P. Sears was a political comedian, definitely on the left. He eventually concluded, he says, I see darkness growing in the world, and I have to conclude that if there's darkness, there must be light. And he chose to become a Christian. Russell Brand, again, he would be definitely on the sort of the left of the political spectrum, believing in Eastern religions, becomes a Christian. Ayaan Hirsi Ali comes out from Africa, escaping a marriage, embraces new atheism, speaking with Richard Dawkins,
Yeah.
has become a Christian. Her husband, Niall Ferguson, a academic atheistic historian, has become a Christian. Jordan Peterson, I'm not convinced he is a Christian,
No.
but he says you have to believe that God is real.
Mm.
You have to believe Jesus rose from the dead because what's your alternative? The value system is so good. Joe Rogan, some think he's become a Christian. Tucker Carlson speaks like a Christian, though he has varying ethics. Piers Morgan from the left, but now promoting conservatism and saying Christianity is important
Yeah.
while not a Christian. Konstantin Kisin would be another news reporter who's the same. Douglas Murray, an openly gay journalist,
Hmm.
saying Christianity is really important. We've got to preserve its story within our culture. Tom Holland, academic historian, liberal, lefty, atheistic, now embracing Christianity. His journey took quite a while. His book Dominion tells an amazing story. We're just seeing it right across our culture as we awaken to the fact that there's no such thing as neutral. And this idea that secular by itself would bring a utopian future is being discovered to actually be false. In which case, the society is asking, who actually are we? And we're discovering we believe in the value of the individual because we believe they were created equally in the image of God. And all else flows from that founding idea.
Even Richard Dawkins, the king of all atheists,
Yes.
claiming to be a cultural Christian, which is quite remarkable. Why do you think this is happening now? I mean, yes, we can go, hey, Spirit of God, God is doing something in amongst this, and ultimately, of course, we recognize God's sovereignty. But is there something culturally which is happening which has led to this change, in your view, Dave?
Yeah, I think it's singularly the fact that our freedoms have begun to be undermined. For as long as every individual felt in our society that they were free to do whatever they liked with reasonable limitation only, it was fine. But I think what we've seen is we've seen a part of the political spectrum overreach to begin to control everyday people's lives. And it's awoken our wider society to say, hold on, that's not my value system.
Yeah.
But that begs the question, well, what is my value system? And why do I think or hold the values that I do? And the moment you push into that, you realize that atheism itself gives you no basis for the value of the individual. In which case you look into our history and you realize that Christianity does. In which case we've been taught to hate Christianity, but actually we're the most free, prosperous, equality-based, charitable society on the planet in human history.
Hmm.
That's not actually a bad thing. And so I think just the overreach of political powers, the affronts to freedom, have caused a grassroots awakening and a questioning of a narrative that we otherwise ignored because we didn't think that our freedoms were being in any way confronted.
When we look at, I suppose, how we respond to this, there would be perhaps a tendency for some to lean into a sort of triumphalist, "Yay, we won." Isn't it great that these liberal lefties have lost, and we are triumphant over our enemy in that regard. And certainly there is, in some quarters, a little bit of rhetoric along these lines. How should we respond? How can we bring a bit more grace to this equation, Dave?
Yeah, well, let me just say that politics is going to be corrupted for as long as human beings are there. So if we have any false notion of our society going to a new utopian heaven-like sort of
Yeah.
place through all of this, I think we're mistaken. Everywhere humans are, there's going to be human nature and there's going to end up being corruption and whatever else. Politics is always going to be messy. What I would say for the Christian church is that we're fighting a different battle. And the tares and the wheat, the story of the wheat and the weeds, better
Yeah.
English,
Yeah.
Jesus' parable. And they're going to grow up together, and you're not going to see the difference between the wheat and the weeds. But when Jesus returns, might be this week, Andrew,
Yeah.
you're going to see the weeds taken away, and the wheat is going to be left standing there.
Yeah.
The kingdom of God isn't the kingdom of this world. It's about the hearts of people. And so as people's hearts begin to question the Christian church, well, we're growing. People are showing more interest today than 3 years ago in Christianity, right across Western civilization. The same is true. We've had people visit our church simply because of Charlie Kirk's death,
Yeah.
giving their lives to Christ. This is right through our civilization. The Christian church has to now find its voice. We've been silenced for decades, and we've learned to be sheepish about our faith and hiding away. We don't have to tell everyone Jesus is Lord, you must follow him.
Hmm.
We can be more gentle, but we could say Christianity's flipping amazing. Absolutely amazing. Look at our cultural benefits that we have, our freedoms, our equality, our charity. We can tell the testimony of our lives being changed. We can stand with awe looking at the amazing creation and the design and the complexity, and just time and again through our stories and conversations, pointing to the wonder of what's around us. And as the Holy Spirit draws, if we will tell the story, including, of course, God's story, the story of Jesus, our people will begin to find what they're looking for. We have to find our voice and speak. And I think that for us is the primary conclusion.
And certainly it's not one of those mic drop moments where you go, oh, well, Russell Brand has become a Christian, so obviously the tide has turned. We'll just let God do what God does. No, now is a time to get busy, to be equipped to know our story, and to be ready to have robust conversations with people who have very different opinions than ourselves. Dave, thank you for the work that you do, both with the Hope Project and with the conversational evangelism work that you do, and now this book. Certainly looking forward to that book being available to help us know and tell our story, although certainly a few months to wait until that happens. But appreciate you and what you do. Thanks for joining us.
Awesome. Thank you, Andrew.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.